Hey guys, so we're going to start with learning about trophic levels, and basically trophic is how energy is passed throughout an ecosystem. So here we go. So energy is passed to the next trophic level in small amounts. Basically the idea is that all of our energy comes from the sun, and then it goes, directly to the plants. But as that energy moves, meaning being eaten from one organism to the next level, there's energy that's actually lost. And this idea is called the 10% rule. 10% of the energy goes to the next trophic level. The rest of that energy, which is 90%, is actually lost through heat. All right, so here's a picture. We have the 10% rule, and the three things you need to know about it is that energy is going to decrease as it moves through the ecosystem, and 10% of the energy goes to the next trophic level. 90% of the energy is lost through heat. Now, when we talk about heat, we're looking at organisms that can move, so they're breathing, running, they're reproducing, and they're hunting. So the energy that they initially would have received from that first trophic level is going to be lost in just trying to get food and trying to live. So if we look here, we've got the sun. All the energy, 100% from the sun, is going to go into a plant, the producers. Okay, so as the producers grow, there's some heat that's lost, but really the rabbits are going to eat, which a rabbit is a primary consumer, is going to eat the plants and consume that energy to the next trophic level. Okay, then energy will be lost through heat, and a snake will eat a rabbit. A rabbit will only be able to pass 10% of the energy it got from the plant to the snake. More energy is lost. And then at our tertiary consumer, which is our third level consumer, they're only receiving a small amount of energy because all the initial energy has been transformed to each trophic level, but the amount of heat is still is reducing that total amount of kilocalories or that amount of energy. And this is another example. Basically, it's 10% of the energy that was available at the first level is passed on to the next. So yes, a tree or a plant is going to get 100% of its energy from the sun. Okay? Out of that 100% that is available from a whisk fern, for example, only 10% of that is going to move to that next trophic level. Okay? At this second trophic level, where there's a turkey vulture and a centipede, from there, only 10% of the initial energy moves to the next level. So 10% of 10 is only 1% that the red-tailed hawk gets, or the desert pocket mouse. And then only 10% of 1% gets to the desert coyote. Now this is really important because when we talk about feeding and levels and who gets to eat what, I want you guys to start thinking about what are the best choices of foods to eat and which level do we want to eat from. What are the benefits of a vegetarian versus someone who eats a lot of meat. Okay, we have to talk about some limiting factors. Basically, energy in this case is a limiting factor. Now, the sun is always going to give heat. The sun is always going to give energy. That's not what we're arguing about. But it's the available energy that we have for our utilization, which is so important because we know 90% of that energy is going to be lost. Therefore, the energy that's passed from one level to the next is a limiting factor. So a limiting factor is an abiotic factor that will stop growth of any kind. And we're going to talk about some limiting factors when we address the issues of your hydroponic plants. Okay, so each limiting factor is identified depending on the situation. So it may not be about how much you can eat or how much land we have, but it all depends on what's needed for that particular situation. For example, the sun could be a limiting factor for your hydroponic plant. It would limit the amount of growth your plant is going to have. Another idea could be that space could be a limiting factor because roots on a tree want to spread out. If there's not enough space, it's going to stop the growth of that tree. It's a really interesting fact, and I really will enjoy talking to you about it in class tomorrow. Okay, types of eaters. So maybe you've heard of these before, but we're just going to go over the different types of eaters before we talk about like feeding relationships. So we have plants who are autotrophs, meaning they make their own food, so they don't eat. But the first level would be herbivores, which eat plants. Okay, the root is herb, H-E-R-B, which means a plant. Okay, omnivore, omni means all, so an omnivore is going to eat plants and animals. A carnivore, on the other hand, only eats carne, so meat. Carnivores eat meat. What does vor mean? Write that down in your notes. What do you think vor means? Great. All right. Then we have detritivores and decomposers. Now, the only difference between a detritivore and a decomposer is a detritivore has a mouth. It actually eats things and breaks it down. They do the same thing, but decomposers actually absorb small pieces of dead items through their skin and then excrete the pure nutrient. So the way that I remember what goes in that category as far as decomposers and detritivores, it's going to be the FBI: fungi, bacteria, and insects. Okay, insects have mouths. Worms, some worms actually fall into this category too, but they basically break down small pieces of dead particles and turn it into nutrients. On the other hand, fungi actually utilize those dead particles and it comes through their skin, and that's how it's going to break down and turn into pure nutrients. And the nutrients that we're talking about are our major ones we just learned about, which are phosphorus, carbon, and nitrogen. Okay, in class we're going to talk about an ecosystem, and also your summary question is about how all this relates to an ecosystem. So you kind of need to know exactly what that is. An ecosystem has biotic and abiotic factors that live in one particular area. So the area we're going to look at is the marine ecosystem. So it has water, salt, aquatic plants, fish, plankton, and rocks. It's basically everything that is encompassing that particular area. All right, please make sure that you take extra notes on your paper because I will be checking off your notes tomorrow. Don't just fill in the blank. I need to see that you're going a little further. Thanks. See you soon.